Hi BookTube. So even though we're well into February, I wanted to go ahead and mention some of my favorites from January, because even though I didn't film any wrap-up videos in January, I didn't want to completely go by without mentioning my favorites. I read a total of 44 books, and I'm going to share with you 5 of my favorites, and I'm hoping going forward, February on, that I'm going to be doing weekly wrap up, so that way I don't miss all of these books, because I'm only sharing with you 5, but I read 39 other books that I'm just not going to be mentioning, because we would just be here all day long. But yeah, hopefully going forward, I'm going to stick to this of doing weekly wrap-ups. So as for some of my favorites, the first one is Ex Libris by Anne Fadiman. This is the first book I've read by Anne Fadiman, and she's written several books, and a lot of them have to do with reading and literature. And this is a collection of essays, and it talks about just how books like get into our lives, and for the better. And it talks about how, for example, how you organize your bookshelves, and she talks about how her parents organized them compared to how she has her bookcases. And then when she gets married, at first her and her husband have their bookshelves completely separate parts of the apartment, and then like we've committed to this relationship, we should put our books all together. And then like, what do you do if you have 2 copies of a book? Do you get rid of one? And it was just, and then what if you get divorced? Then what are you gonna do? Like, how are you going to rebuy all these copies? So little things like that I just thought was fascinating. Sorry if the camera is shaking. Fable is, as always, right behind the camera on the bed. Oh, yeah, she's looking at me like who are you talking to? Or are you talking to me? I'm not sure. Yes, so sorry if there's any shaking. But yeah, it was just a really nice, quick read. And yeah, if you like reading books about books, then this is a great one to pick up. And I was also fascinated, like, because I didn't really know much about Anne Fadiman, but when I was looking, I always like look on Wikipedia like on a daily basis practically. If it's like a location or that a book mentions that I don't know about, I'll look it up, or a famous person or an author. So in this case, the author, like her parents and a lot of her family are very like, I guess, well-known people that I had never known about. The next one is Pig Years by Ellen Gaydos, and this was a very hard read to get through, and I really liked it, but it was hard because this is about a farmer who doesn't shy away from the grim details of not just like the agricultural part of pumpkins and corn and vegetables, things like that, but then also she talks a lot to do with pigs. And she, outside of the farm, this is taking place in New England, like Vermont, New York, like the upper part. And she talks about how she's always loved working outside, and so she decides to become a farmer. And this is present day, and this is like very small farms as well. It's not like the huge California farms that I've seen like driving around. And so she really gets to know like the farmers and things like that. But with the pigs, most of them, she is like a side, like at her home location, she is raising 2 or 3 pigs at a time, and she knows full well going in that these are not pets, and she is raising them to be slaughtered for their meat. And see, that was really hard for me to read about. Yeah, but it will stick with me. But the writing, it was just so well done. It's like, it's earthy is how I would describe it. Like, she's working in the soil, and she's planting in the heat and in the winter and all of that, and you can just really feel that is what I would say. So if you can like handle like sad topics and things like that in like more graphic, gritty detail, this for sure would be a great book to read. And the next one is Gretel, I can never pronounce it, Lil's last name, Ehrlich, A Match to the Heart, a woman's story of being struck by lightning. And this is Gretel's story of being struck by lightning in Wyoming, and it was so fascinating to me reading this book was how when she's in Wyoming, she goes to get medical care, like as you would want to do if you're getting struck by lightning, and how just the doctors dismiss her. She goes back home after being seen by 1 or 2 different clinics, and there's like nothing they can do. You look fine. Go ahead and go home. Now, don't even really give her any medication, I don't think. but every time she keeps passing out, and every time she stands up, she passes out. So obviously something's going wrong here, and so she goes back to her parents' house in Santa Barbara, California, and they have a lot more medical care there in Los Angeles, and so she befriends the doctor in that area and talks about how this goes through talking about how there isn't at the time, I don't know if it was written, I think it was like in the I don't even know, like 80s, 90s, I'm not sure, how there wasn't a dedicated resource book for doctors to go to figure out how you can treat this. So like luckily she has someone who knows what they're doing, and eventually they figure out how to help her. But yeah, it was just fascinating reading about how this lightning, like, coursing through your body and what it can do. And she meets up with this organization that but like brings attention to people of like lightning strikes and like the different ways that can happen and what are the outcomes. And I can't remember, it's like something like 25 or 30% of the people die, or it's either 25 or 30% of the people live. I don't know, it was one or the other, but it was like, it was high number either way. But yeah, this was like a great read. I've read a couple of her other books, and all of them I've really liked. She has like a poetical kind of way of talking, like philosophical. I mean, I don't really like philosophy books, but I do like her writing. I then have Mary Emma and Company by Ralph Moody. This is part of, I think it's like the Little Britches series, and don't let the name fool you. It's Little Britches is like, I think it's like in the first book, how Ralph Moody is they're going from New England to Colorado way back in like the early 1900s, or maybe early 1800s. I mean late 1800s, around that time period, where Denver is very much still a ranching community. It's not a city at all, really. And so Little Britches is that's coming from, is the nickname given to him because he was riding horses and working on these ranches and like trying to like break horses and that kind of thing. So like the cowboys there gave him that name. So the Little Britches series, I think this is like book 5 or 6, and this is about Mary Emma, and this is that's his mother, and of course she's been mentioned since book 1, but in this book she really gets he flushes out her character, and this is nonfiction, I should mention. But in this story, they're going from Colorado back to New England because they couldn't make it work in Colorado, like without family assistance, because now she is a single mother, and so she goes in Boston area, and it's very different from the Denver area, of course. And so even though they have like amenities of running water and bathrooms and things like that, you still have to contend with being able to afford living in Boston as a single parent. And so Ralph and his siblings find ways of making money, and I'm probably making this sound really boring, but it wasn't. It was just because I think the whole series as a whole is fascinating to read about. But just like the strong will of character is what I liked about this, and how they don't let anything get them down. They're always like, no, they're more like idealistic. I feel like in a way of like, there's always hope. Even though we're really bad right now, it's always gonna there's always a bright side to things. And then the last book I have here is by Helen Hoover. This is The Gift of the Deer. It's illustrated by her husband, Adrian Hoover. And I've read one or two, I think 2 of her other books. And this is, all of her books so far that I've read are about her time spent in northern Minnesota. In a previous book I read by her, I talked about her journey from Chicago, which was like, she was like a very successful, I think, chemist. Something like chemistry or science. And her husband was an artist in Chicago as well, but they were getting up in age, like I think like 40s or 50s, and they thought, why not go ahead and go after our dream that they've always wanted of living out in the like out in nature, far from any city. And so let's do it now before old age and everything can make it more hazardous than it already is. Sorry, Fables moved the camera a couple of times with her feet like hitting the stand here. I'm not sure exactly where I left off. I think talking about them going to northern Minnesota after Chicago. But so in this story, she's very curious right now. She's like, because I have the camera propped up where she normally sits to look out the windows here, and she's kind of like pushing out of the way, or just like, what is this and why is it here? So sorry for all the movement. But in this one, so in the previous book, they talk about, setting up their cabin in the woods and why they chose that area and in their surroundings. But so in this book, it's mainly just focused on the deer that are in their area. And again, that can probably sound maybe a little bit boring, but there is one deer in particular, and I can't remember his name, because they give them names. Even though these are not pets at all, they are still very much wild animals. But there's one that they encounter who was very sickly, very malnourished, because he got shot, but he survived it. And so he was having trouble eating during the winter, and so they feed him. And he keeps coming back throughout the years, and he brings his friends and his girlfriend, and whatever, so they could get to know the other deer in the little community of deer. And so it was a really cute book, even though of course there's gonna be sad moments with wild animals, but it just made me appreciate the deer in my area. Fable, speaking of Fable, she's always very, of course, dogs, they're gonna pick up on different animals in the area, because so far what I've seen walking around here, because there is some woods nearby, coyotes, raccoons, deer, of course birds, and all of that, but those are the three animals wild animals that we see all the time. And yeah, the deer, there's a family of 4 deer that we always see, and so whenever we go in this particular area, she's always wanted to go these little mini trails that you can see, and I do walk through them sometimes when it's not so muddy with all the rain, so I'm not slipping and sliding everywhere. But I feel like she's gonna take me to their home location or something, because she can for sure smell them. So anyway, those were my favorite books from January, and again, holding myself accountable to weekly wrap-ups in February. And again, sorry for the shaking of the camera. I wish Fables are on this side, so she can look in and say hi to all of you. But yeah, this again, perched on her window, her little window perch, and so she's fascinated by all the outside goings on. So anyway, let me know what your favorite books in January were, or if you've read any of these books, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks, BookTube.